Hello there and welcome to the Bloodmaul Slag Mines Heroic Guide. My name is Tuskeh, and in this video we'll go through everything you need to know in order to complete the Bloodmaul Slag Mines on its heroic difficulty. To enter Warlords of Draenor Heroics, you must have an item level of 610, and you must have completed the Proving Grounds on Bronze and Silver for the role you wish to play as. Remember that 5-man heroics in Warlords of Draenor are significantly harder than Mists of Pandaria heroics, and you will require teamwork, coordination, and concentration in order to succeed. They're best run with friends or guild members, but if you do join a pickup group, remember to communicate as much as you can. Prepare for difficulty, prepare to wipe, and prepare to take your time. The trash up to the first boss can be nasty if you pull more than one group, so make sure to use crowd control abilities to fight one enemy at a time. If you have to fight multiple enemies, tanks and healers be prepared to use cooldowns to survive. The first two Bloodmaul Enforcers hit fairly hard and have a crush ability, which deals damage in front of them after a short cast. Tanks face them away from the group and dodge to the side to avoid crush. They'll also randomly leap to ranged party members and deal area of effect damage, so staying spread out will help mitigate this. The Bloodmaul Overseers have a casted Subjugate spell, which will stun a party member for several seconds while the Overseer channels. You can interrupt the cast, the channel, or dispel the magical stun if you're a healer. They'll also cast Suppression Field, which places a purple void zone on the ground that silences anyone standing in it. Interrupt this if you can, and make sure to step out of the void zone to remove the silence. The Bloodmaul Slavers will pull ranged party members to them and deal a chunk of damage. This is just unavoidable. They also buff themselves with Slaver's Rage, which is an enrage effect that increases the damage they deal. This can stack, so keeping them alive for a long time is not a good idea. Either kill them fast or crowd control them. Use anti-enrage effects like Soothe, Tranquilizing Shot, and Shiv to remove Slaver's Rage. As you make your way into the corridors of the Slag Mines, watch for patrols. The ogres move very fast even while out of combat, and can easily surprise your group if you don't spot them at range. Use ranged crowd controls to stop them from reaching you. The Bloodmaul Geomancers have an interruptible Stone Bolt for damage and a casted Stone Bulwark ability that buffs its allies with a huge Absorb Shield, so either interrupt the cast or use Offensive Dispels to remove the Absorb Shield. Once you make your way to the Slag Forge, you'll be faced with a gauntlet of elementals. The Searing Embers are small elementals that just melee the tank. The Vengeful Magma Elemental summons more Searing Embers, so focus it down first. The Unstable Magma Elementals slowly deplete their own life and will explode for AoE damage when they die. The Molten Earth Elemental has a cleave attack that leaves a damage over time on the tank that can be dispelled, so make sure to face it away from the group. And it also throws small lava boulders at players that explode for damage. This has no cast, so you have to watch the floor for these. Finally, the Magma Lord in the center of the first room is a mini-boss that has an interruptible fireball, pillars of fire that randomly move around the room, so make sure you avoid them, and it will frequently spawn more Searing Embers, Vengeful Magma Elementals, Unstable Magma Elementals, and Molten Earth Elementals from the furnaces around it. Focus the Magma Lord down as quickly as you can once you reach him, as his death will stop this gauntlet. Make sure you put whatever AoE you can down as well, and use area of effect stuns to keep things as controlled as you can. The biggest threat to your group here is a tank death, as a result of being overwhelmed by the adds. Take a short break to recover after you've cleared this gauntlet, as it can be quite taxing on your healer's mana. Continue around the large fire and to the last trash pack before the first boss. This pool consists of multiple ogres and elementals, and since they're already fighting, it's very difficult to get any kind of crowd control going. I would definitely suggest using your tank and healer cooldowns here, as this trash pack is extremely intense. Not only is this pack difficult, but it also introduces 3 new ogre enemies. The Bloodmaul Warder, whose main ability is a frightening roar. After a cast, this will deal damage to and fear the entire group for a few seconds. Interrupt this spell as much as you can, but fear wards and tremor totems before the cast gets off can help mitigate the loss of control. The Bloodmaul Magma Binders cast Lava Burst for damage on the tank, which is pretty heavy, and channel Magma Binding on a player for damage and a reduction to move, cast, and attack speed. Interrupt the Magma Binding and also the Lava Bursts if you can. Finally, the Bloodmaul Ogre Mages cast Lava Burst for more tank damage, hooray, and cast Blood Rage on their allies, which increases their attack and cast speed. Interrupt Blood Rage if you can. As you can see on screen now, this trash pack can be very difficult. Use whatever AoE stuns, silences, and interrupts that you can, and destroy the ogres as quickly as possible. Their deaths will stop the elementals from spawning. Interestingly enough, our tank died right before we finished off the ogres, meaning that the elementals despawned while we were running back to recover from our wipe. As long as you can kill the ogres and control the elementals, you should be able to make your way past this trash pack. The first boss, Forgemaster Gogda and Magmalatus, is a 2-phase fight. In the first phase, you will fight the Forgemaster and his adds, and in the second phase, you will fight Magmalatus and his adds. In Phase 1, the Forge Master will spam Magma Barrage to coat parts of the floor with fire. Don't stand in the fire, folks, that's the only ability that he has. Just note that the fire doesn't last very long, so you will still have plenty of room, but since he spams it, you'll have to move a lot. Almost right off the bat, the Forge Master will summon Ruination, his first add. Focus it down as quickly as you can. Ruination will use Rough Smash, which is a short cast time conal attack that stuns anyone it hits. Tanks, face Ruination away from the party and dodge to the side to avoid the smash. Ruination also casts Shatter Earth, which is a small explosion near a party member followed by lines of spikes. Avoid both and the Forge Master's Magma Barrage. The next add that the Forge Master summons is called Calamity. He has an interruptible Scorch attack that deals damage to a random party member, a channeled Firestorm for heavy party damage, interrupt it as soon as you can, and Dancing Flames, which places a dispellable magic debuff on 2 party members. It deals damage for about 6 seconds, and then will jump to a nearby player. If you get this debuff, move away from other people in your party and try to wait it out. Since dispels have a cooldown that's longer than the duration of this debuff, the healer will only be able to dispel one of the two. So, healers try to dispel either the tank or melee classes so that they can continue doing their thing without having to run away. Finish off Calamity, and then once you get the Forge Master down to about 10% health, he'll be killed by Magmalatus, who will take his place. At this point, Phase 2 begins. You'll want to Bloodlust at this point if you can. Magmalatus uses Molten Impact to fire a meteor at the ground. This deals damage to the group and summons a Molten Elemental. Kill this as quickly as you can, as both of its abilities will put fire on the floor. It should die fairly fast, but if there's any fire on the floor, avoid it. Magmalatus will also use Slag Smash, a short-casted ability that, after a second or so, will deal damage to and stun anyone in melee range. Tanks and melee, make sure you run away from the boss as he casts this. Finally, Magmalatus uses Withering Flames on a random party member, dealing heavy damage over time. If not dispelled, it will inflict other players with a similar debuff that also slows movement, casting, and attack speed, and cannot be dispelled. So healers, make sure you dispel Withering Flames as fast as you can. So, a quick recap of the fight. Phase 1. Kill Ruination while avoiding stuff on the ground, then kill Calamity while dispelling and staying spread out if you're range, and also avoiding stuff on the ground. Kill the Forge Master. Phase 2. Kill Magmalatus, kill his adds as fast as you can, dispel the moment you see Withering Flames, and melee move out of range of Slag Smash to avoid being stunned. The trash up towards the second boss is nothing you haven't seen before. A couple of slavers can be killed as you move forward, and then a single Overseer. But a mini-boss called Slagna will appear from a nearby lava pool as you move past. She's just a lava worm that will spam lava spit on random players, dealing AoE damage after a short cast. This can be moved out of, and you should do so. Stay spread out and move out of her lava spit. Another pack of slavers and an enforcer is next, and then a mini-boss called Nasher. He has a long-casted ability called Furious Swipes that, near the end of it, will deal extremely heavy damage to the tank and knock them back. Make sure that you face him away from the group and either use a cooldown to survive this, or just move away from him. He'll also randomly dot players, so healers keep an eye on people's health. Be warned that a patrol of 1 Geomancer and 1 Overseer moves very close to this mini-boss, so pulling him back will help you significantly. Don't body pull the patrol, like I did, because I'm a moron. Next up is a pack of an Overseer, an Enforcer, and a Geomancer. After that, a group of 2 Ogre Mages and a Warder. After you kill this last pack, 2 more Warders will attack the group from the boss's room, so crowd control one and fight the other if you can. The second boss, Slave Watcher Crushtoe, is a fairly simple one-phase fight. Bloodlust on the pull. He will use Earth Crush fairly often. This summons a pillar of earth, which he will then shatter. Although the animation doesn't look that menacing, this will in fact deal very high damage to and stun anyone in a cone that has a practically unlimited range. So stay close to the boss and move around him to avoid this, since he has no other threats for range to worry about. Crushtoe will also use Ferocious Yell, which is an interruptible cast that will increase his damage by 15% and weaken the will of nearby minor slaves. These are just the adds of the fight, and will help him depending on how many times he has cast Ferocious Yell. Basically, interrupt Ferocious Yell as much as you can and the whole fight will be easier. Finally, Crushtoe will use a combination of 3 abilities. He will start by using Raise the Miners, which will call adds depending on how many Ferocious Yells he's cast, followed afterwards by a Wild Slam, which deals heavy amounts of damage to the whole group, and the miners, and knocks everyone back. After this, he will randomly leap to 1 party member and hit them with Crushing Leap. This does no damage, but it will root them for several seconds. The miners will then focus on the target of the Crushing Leap, and will put a stacking damage over time and damage taken increase on them. Those are all of his abilities, and this is how to handle them. The whole group should stick close to Crushtoe and move around him to avoid Earth Smash. When he uses Wild Slam, everyone will be knocked back, and he will hit 1 person with Crushing Leap. the miners will go for them. Use your AoE stuns, roots, and damage to kill the miners quickly as they have little health. Once the Crushing Leap's route ends, the miners will be tankable, so tanks pick them up while everyone else cleaves them down. Beware of heavy tank damage if multiple miners hit the tank with their damage taken debuff. Always interrupt Ferocious Yell, and repeat this whole process until the Slave Master falls. Once Crushtoe dies, you'll be treated to a short cinematic and the bridge to the last boss will open, but you'll have to get past some more trash and another boss before you reach him. Return to the bridge area and be prepared to face a large pack of trash. This pack includes 1 Enforcer, 1 Warder, 1 Overseer, and 2 Geomancers. Crowd control as many as you can and fight them, preferably one at a time, dealing with their mechanics as previously discussed. Roltol is the next boss, and he is a large step up in difficulty from the previous bosses. Primarily a DPS race, you'll have to kill him before he covers the bridge with fire and then runs you over with boulders. Use Bloodlust on the pull. So, first and foremost, at all times, Roltol has a Scorching Aura that reduces the cast speed of any nearby players by 100%. If you're within 15 yards, you'll be hit by this, so ranged party members and the healer must remain at a distance from him. You can't stack here. Also as a note, since Roltol doesn't move, if he has no target in melee range, he'll use Molten Reach to rapidly kill the group. Roltol will use his abilities in a very specific order. First, he will use Fiery Boulder 3 times. This causes a large boulder to land near him and roll down the bridge. Then it will bounce off of the end of the bridge, roll back to his side, and then despawn. Getting hit by a boulder will cause a heavy amount of damage and stun you, so you need to avoid these. If you're in melee, remember that you can see where these boulders will spawn, and you need to avoid them as well. There are 3 areas he can spawn a boulder: left, middle, and right. Depending on what order he uses them in, you'll need to avoid them in certain ways. After the first boulder goes past you, dodge the second boulder and get behind it. This will allow you to dodge both the first boulder's return and the third boulder's first run. The first and third boulder will have a moment where they go past one another. Once that moment happens, move to the path of the first boulder, where it's safe. This will allow you to avoid both the second and third boulder's return. I bugger this up multiple times in the footage, but you can see how this would work. As the third boulder is on its return path, Roltol will use Heat Wave. This deals heavy damage to the group and pushes them back for 8 seconds. Use survivability cooldowns and cast while moving abilities here to keep damage and healing going. Once Heatwave is over, Roltol will then use Burning Slag several times. This will place fire on the bridge that will not despawn until the fight ends. Standing in this fire will deal damage, but nothing more than that. Note that this should change how you avoid the boulders, as you don't want to sit in the fire while waiting for a boulder to come by you. But getting hit by the fire is not nearly as bad as getting hit by a boulder, but if you get hit by both, you'll probably die. The second wave of boulders will come in. Once again, avoid them as best you can while staying out of the fire. The whole technique kind of goes out the window depending on where the fire is, so just avoid it as best you can, and remember that they'll come back the other way. The heat wave will hit as the third boulder returns, and you'll have to avoid being pushed into fire by it. Roltol will put down more fire, giving you even less room to work with. At this point, he needs to be pretty low on health. Once again, the boulders come in, avoid them, and be prepared to jump into fire momentarily to avoid being stunned. Then, as the third boulder returns, the heat wave will come in. At this point, you'll want to use every cooldown in the book. Then, Roltol will put down enough fire to cover the entire bridge. He needs to die within seconds of doing this, because this is basically the Berserk. If you don't kill him now, you'll wipe. This fight is a race to the finish, so put as much damage as you can on Roltol early. Use all of your cooldowns and kill him as quickly as you can. Remember to avoid boulders, remember that they will return back to the boss's side of the bridge, stay out of the fire, use cooldowns to survive heatwave, and keep up as much damage as you can. This fight is tough, and may take several attempts. The trash up to the last boss is entirely new. You'll start with one Bloodmaul Ogron, who deals group damage with Colossal Roar, and who does a massive stomp to knock back and deal damage to anyone in melee range. Ranged, keep away from it and blanket heal the group if you're the healer. The next pack is 2 of these Ogron. Focus one down, but note that they cannot be CC'd, so you'll have to fight both of them. Marking one can help a great deal here. Don't fight them near the lava, as you can get knocked into it and killed, as I have discovered.
About 70% accuracy.
After that, the final trash pack of the group will consist of 4 Bloodmaul Flame Speakers. Don't be fooled by their distance from one another, as attacking any of them will aggro them all, so CC all but one of them. They will channel flames for heavy damage in a cone, so tanks face them away from the group and step to one side to avoid it. They'll also cast Exploding Flames, which puts an orb on the ground that will deal damage to anyone near it. Interrupt the cast to avoid dealing with this, but if you see an orb on the ground, just move away from it as quickly as you can. After the trash dies, it's on to the final boss, Gogrok. This fight is very difficult and requires good control of where you're standing. Gogrok will cast Molten Blast on the tank for heavy damage, but you should interrupt this, as each time he casts it, he will gain a stack of Molten Core. This dispellable buff increases his damage, but if it reaches 3 stacks, he will cast Molten Barrage for extremely heavy group damage. This can wipe you, so never let the stack reach 3, either through interrupts or offensive dispels. Gogrok will also periodically cast Flame Buffet, which deals group damage and increases damage taken. This will stack, and requires dispelling. If you can dispel yourself, make sure you do so. And as the healer, make sure you dispel anyone who has about 5 or more stacks. But don't go overboard with the dispelling, as you'll need to use your mana effectively throughout this very long fight. Running out of mana is very much a possibility here. Gogrok's next ability is Magma Eruption, and it is the main mechanic of this fight. This ability places a pool of fire at everyone's feet, which deals heavy damage if stood in. The nasty part is that the fire will last for the entire fight, so just randomly spreading out around the boss will only result in you running out of room. The way we handled this is to mark each furnace around the room, slowly moving between them as a group to avoid fire. Stay close to the pools of fire so that the next pool at your feet will be placed next to existing ones. This gives you as much room and as much time as possible to finish the fight. Gogrok will also cast Summon Unstable Slag, which creates an ad with about 300,000 health that will slowly move towards a furnace. This ad can be rooted and knocked back, but not permanently controlled. Ranged should focus this guy down as quickly as possible, and melee should help if the ad is nearby, but generally stay on the boss if you're melee to help keep the fight going. For this reason, you'll want to bring both melee and range to this instance. If the Unstable Slag reaches its furnace, it will become empowered and deal damage to the entire group every 3 seconds. You don't want to let this happen. So those are all of Gogrok's abilities, but he uses them almost constantly. Ranged, kill the Unstable Slag as soon as possible, root it, knock it back, all that stuff. And keep your duts up on Gogrok. Melee, stay on the boss. Healers, dispel 5 or more stacks of Flame Buffet. Make sure everyone interrupts and or dispels Molten Blast and Molten Core. And if Gogrok ever reaches 3 stacks and uses Molten Barrage, use every survivability cooldown you have to survive it, because this can often mean a wipe. So be very careful. The main problem with this fight is that it takes such a long time, especially in low gear right now, and you can easily run out of room if you don't use the space available to you smartly. So, stick to the outside of the room as much as you can. Use every trick in the book to win, and after a couple of attempts you should be able to beat this bugger. Once Gogrok dies, you have completed the heroic. Congratulations! If you want to see the instance in more detail, you can view the full clear that was used to make this guide by clicking on screen now. That's it for this video. If you have any thoughts, questions, or suggestions, you can contact me using the links in the description, or you can just leave a comment. Make sure you join the discussion at reddit.com/r/Tuskeh, and I offer my heartfelt thanks to any and all who contribute to this channel through the Patreon system. You can find links to all of this stuff in the description. Thank you very much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck in the Bloodmaul Slag Mines.